Hello everyone, what's going on? I'm Gareth the Master974 back again today, and welcome to a different sort of video because I know some of you guys might expect this to be a tutorial, but unfortunately it's not. As the title may suggest, this is a video about why the Nth Terrain Morph entity cannot be added into a Source 2013 mod. Now I'll get to the actual reasoning a little bit later, but I do want to talk a little bit about this and why I'm doing this video and ultimately why you can't add it into Source 2013. So if you were to, for example, go into the Half-Life 2 Hammer editor even after the 20th anniversary update and go to the list of entities that exist, then you can see that the Nth Terrain Morph entity is present and you can place it in a map, get some information about what the entity was supposed to be able to do. So for example, we can give the entity a name, a start goal radius, a duration, displacement fraction, and if the terrain morph should be instantaneous in the spawn flags. The direction of motion of the terrain morph would have to be added by disabling Smart Edit unfortunately, but that is pretty much the crux of how you would go about placing the entity in a map. But the downside is, if you were to, say, compile a map with an Nth Terrain Morph entity present, then when the map gets loaded, that entity will get removed, because it's not included in the game files, thus the Nth Terrain Morph entity is a null int and it gets deleted. Now if you wanted to see what the Nth Terrain Morph entity was supposed to do more visually, then you'd have to go back to Valve's E3 demonstration from 2003, which goes without saying that it was before Half-Life 2 officially came out, and you would see that the Nth Terrain Morph entity would essentially displace geometry in real time. So it's using the paint geometry tool in the Hammer editor, just without the editor, just using it with the engine instead. Now if you were to look into leaked files that were made available before Half-Life 2's official release, which is often referred to as the Half-Life 2 beta, you would actually find a test map for the Nth Terrain Morph entity called Test Room Terrain Morph, which would show instantaneous and gradual terrain morphing. Now what if I were to tell you that there is actually a version of the source code that was released where you can use the Nth Terrain Morph entity to some extent? Well, that is actually true, but the thing is, the code that you need to get is the Source 2006 code. Yeah. Now, one thing that I find kind of problematic with this is that you need to use a very old version of Visual Studio. In fact, I think it's called something like Visual C++ 2005 Express Edition or something, but yeah, it's some very old version of Visual Studio or whatever you want to call it, for a 20-year-old or close to 20-year-old version of the source code at this point in time. However, even in a Source 2006 mod, there are going to be a couple of issues. Firstly, the physics collision doesn't get updated. Now, there is a Valve Developer Wiki guide talking about this, which essentially says if you go to disp-common.cpp, you need to go to the apply terrain mod function and replace a hashtag if0 to hashtag if1, or just simply get rid of the hashtag if0 and corresponding hashtag endifparts to make the apply terrain mod function work as it's supposed to. Now the thing is, making changes to this file doesn't actually do anything to stop the physics collision from updating, for a reason that I'll get to momentarily. The other issue that I noticed is that the displacement geometry can disappear when you view it at a particular angle, and I wasn't able to find a fix for this. So let's get into why you cannot add this into a Source 2013 mod. Now even if you had all of the terrain morphing code from Source 2006 and ported it into Source 2013, the entity still won't work, and let's just cut a long story short. One of the files, terrainmod.mgr.cpp, has a line that is contained in that file and it says something like engine arrow apply terrain mod. Now, if you don't know what this means, it's saying go to the engine code and find a function called apply terrain mod and execute the code there. Now, the bad news is this function doesn't exist in the Source 2013 engine code, and unfortunately there's no way to add it because the engine code is inaccessible. I mean, I can show you the Everything Solution projects for Source 2013 single player and Source 2013 multiplayer mods. You won't see the engine codes there. So unfortunately, we can't add the Nth Terrain Morph entity because the code is just inaccessible. There's no way to add the functions that you need. Now remember what I said earlier about the disp-common.cpp file? Turns out that file is included in the Source 2013 code, but it's only included in the VRAD project. which I find a little strange because I thought because it's something to do with displacements, it would be more in line with the VBSP project, but apparently it's in the VRAD project. But anyway, one thing that I wanted to point out is that if you were to consult leaked source code after the release of Half-Life 2, then it pretty much confirms that the dispcolcommon.cpp file was supposed to be in the engine code as well as the VRAD project. Therefore, even if you made all of the necessary changes to dispcolcommon.cpp in Source 2013, the terrain morphing behavior just doesn't even happen because the engine code doesn't get changed, and that is ultimately why this doesn't work. I mean, what good is real-time terrain morphing if the code for it is only executed in the VRAD project, which is used when compiling maps, not when the map is actually running in the engine? Now, there's one Hail Mary possibility called DLL injection that may potentially be helpful, but I don't really think there's any chance of that happening because you would have to somehow modify pre-existing code while also adding in new code, and then you need to make calls in the server code to execute the newly injected engine code. Now, if that sounds like a nightmare, it is. At least with something like the skybox culling issue, when you set the FOV to be greater than 90 degrees, which I did do a Valve source code tutorial about. In that case, you would only need to modify one value in the engine DLL to stop that from happening. But in the case of the env terrain morph entity, it's not one value, it's a whole bunch of code that needs to be changed and or added. And to me, that just doesn't seem like something that's possible to do. So the TLDR of the video is you can't add the env terrain morph entity into Source 2013 because you need access to the engine code, and until that code is made available, it's practically impossible. So I know some people have asked about that. That's why I'm doing this video, and unfortunately I don't have any solution for you other than maybe use Source 2006, but even then that really doesn't work too well, at least for my experimentation, or just forget about it. So yeah, I've been here for 8 minutes in this audio recording session. I have no idea how long the video is going to be, and I've screwed up with the audio in a few places as per usual, and I just need to get this outro done quick, that way I don't waste any more of your time. But let me know what you think about the video, and if there's anything else that you want me to potentially look at. I know I've got like 50 viewer requested ideas to work on, so I'll see about getting to work on some of those in the near future. But yeah, peace out, take care there, see you later, have a great day, and subscribe, like, and comment, and check out some of the other videos.